This is the Journey Podcast. We highlight the journeys of our guests, where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. Let's join them on their journey. Well, welcome to the Journey Podcast. Today we are joined by Gregory Offner. Gregory is a globally recognized expert on performance. He is the founder and CEO of Global Performance Institute and an international keynote speaker. His performance agreement methodology has helped organizations develop the skills necessary to thrive under pressure and create cultures of high-performing, highly fulfilled people. In addition to his international business and leadership experience, he holds advanced professional designations in the fields of risk management, organizational development, and Lean, Six Sigma, and positive psychology. Gregory is also an accomplished entertaining, having performed professionally on 5 continents and numerous countries as a solo artist and dueling piano performer. All of these accomplishments have not come without obstacles, however. Gregory is an expert on performance because of the multiple surgeries on his voice and stomach, and Gregory knows about all things that disrupt him. So here is Gregory to tell us his story. Thanks for being here today with us. How you doing today?
Nate, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I am well.
Yes.
Enjoying my week so far.
Thanks for being a part of the Journey Podcast. There's a lot to unpack here that you sent us in the bio, and tell us first about your business and what it is that you do with the Global Performance Institute.
Yeah, so our organization is worldwide, as you imagine, and we serve clients all over the globe. Predominantly, the way that I interact with my clients is through the world of keynote speaking. So I'm brought in to be the speaker at an event, be the speaker at a company kickoff, at an annual association conference or convention. There's all sorts of experiences where an audience will be treated to my program on disruption or my program called the Performance Agreement, which is more about how we perform and the purpose of our performance every day. I grew up performing on stages and then later in life, started to perform in a corporate setting, which you can perform in a boardroom or, as I like to say, at a ballroom. It really depends. But pretty much every day for all of us is a performance. But what's the purpose of that performance? That's what my talks center around. And so the audience gets a few takeaways. They get some exciting ideas presented in an entertaining format. And then generally 1 or 2 or more people will come out of the crowd and say, hey, our organization is wrestling with this. Could you come and work with us? And so I'll wind up doing some corporate engagements as a result of that. But that's the gist of our business. We've been around since 2019. So, impeccable timing for someone who speaks at conferences. We started the business in June of 2019, and then the pandemic happened a couple months later. So we got really good, really quick at virtual events. And now we're getting, back into the swing of things in person, and we're getting even better at the in-person events because we're able to take what we learned in virtual that worked well there and apply it to the real stage. So it's a really exciting time to be doing what I'm doing, and, just glad to have the opportunity to talk with your audience about it.
So with the Global Performance Institute, are you working specifically with certain verticals since it is entertainment based? Like, my mind goes to, well, are you speaking to record labels about how they can use this? Or is it kind of something that you can find for every type of corporate?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's not really the entertainment side of the world that I serve. It's really the corporate B2B or B2C business that's got a couple hundred or tens of thousands of employees that are trying to. So 2 sides of this conversation. One is they're trying to navigate a type of change. So if we're talking about disruption, if the work that we're doing relates to disruption, I'm going in and I'm working with their leadership team about the mindset, talking about the mindset of change. If we're talking about the performance side of our business, if we're looking at how they create an environment of highly fulfilled, high performers, then we're having that conversation with their leadership team. But the entertainment that I think you're thinking of is that I bring my piano into the programming. So I use music as a metaphor in my keynote to make it a little different than what the average person is used to when they think about a keynote. Normally they're thinking about somebody talking and PowerPoint slides, and What they're not expecting is basically a concert on stage.
So you're playing the piano. Are you singing as well during these
Yes.
keynotes?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that in your performance background, because I know you, it says you've performed on 5 continents, and just before we spoke here, you talked about just performing recently at the Rock Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, which is my home city. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I was very young, music was something I was drawn to. And as you get older, it gets harder to figure out how music fits into your life. At least it was for me. When I graduated school, I had spent a lot of my formative years in terms of education focused on music. But as I got out of university, as I graduated university, I didn't see yet how I could turn music into a sustainable living. And so I fell into the world of business. But I always sang in some form or another, whether it was going to karaoke or performing with friends. And then a couple of years into my business career, a friend of a friend told me about a piano bar that was opening nearby that might need some additional talent. And so I went and they hired me, and that started my piano bar career. So I then had 2 jobs. I had a day job where I was working. I mean, like everybody else, I assume sort of, experiences their day job.
Yeah.
But at night, I had this other job where I got to be a dueling piano entertainer. And that for me was what I loved. Unfortunately, the pay to be in sales was a lot better than the pay to be a piano player. So I couldn't figure out how to abandon the day job to just sing and perform all the time. And then life kind of helped me make that decision. In 2015, because of vocal overuse, I suffered an injury to my vocal cords, and doctors said if I didn't address this with surgery, I would lose permanently the ability to speak.
Oh, wow.
So I had to have surgery to repair and rebuild my vocal cords, and then I had to have another surgery, and then I'd have another surgery, and before I knew it, more than half a decade had gone by, and I had had 15 surgical procedures to repair and rebuild my voice.
Wow.
I decided I didn't want to go back to the day job. I really didn't care what I made at that point, but I felt like I'd been given a second chance with my voice, and I wanted to use it for something that was important to me. And I've always been interested in the happiness and fulfillment and I want to say emotional wealth of others. I want to leave people better than they were when I found them. And so it was a natural fit for me to use my experience and my background in business with my experience and background in this 6.5, I'm trying to count now, 6.5 year process of surgeries and voice therapy and living in silence while my vocal cords healed, to fuse those 2 experiences together into a performance that could be valuable for the average business person.
So what was the mental toll like? Like, you're an artist, like this is your hobby, but it's also like, it'd be devastating to any person in business to say you're not going to be able to talk like you do, or maybe never talk again. What's the mental toll like with that?
Yeah, well, so I mean, one is I was paid. So I was a professional musician. It wasn't sort of, just a hobbyist where I'd sing in a church choir. I was getting paid and working all over the world as a professional musician. But, you rightly point out that to lose your voice when that's how you make your living, not just how you express yourself socially, but how you make your living, that for me was a real mental challenge, a mindset challenge. How do I keep my mind healthy and focused on what I want to have as an outcome instead of spiraling and why me? Why? I call it the Nancy Kerrigan effect. Why me was what Nancy shouted when she got hit in the foot with a lead pipe. And I get it. I get it. There's so much work that it takes to get to the Olympics. And so for her hopes to be dashed like that, of course it's natural to wonder and to wonder that question. But it's not healthy to get stuck there. And I knew that if I got stuck there, I would never get out. So for me, that journey, the mental journey you ask about, was one of discovering, why didn't I make the changes that could have saved my voice sooner? It's not like I didn't know what they were. Don't smoke. Don't drink when you're performing because alcohol dries out your vocal cords. Give yourself vocal rest. Warm up before your performances. I mean, these aren't foreign or out there concepts. These are concepts that were well known to me. I mean, I studied music at a collegiate level. So why didn't I do it? And why don't we do it? Why are there changes that all of us talk about making or dream about making in our lives, and yet many of us don't seem to get around to actually changing anything?
So
Why is that?
yeah, and maybe was it? Tell us a little bit more about that. Was it way of life, busyness? So what were your reasons for not doing it up front?
They were all bullshit. I mean, that's really what the ultimate thing is that we have to mention is that whatever the reasons were, they weren't good reasons.
Okay.
Rather, maybe the way to describe it is that they were good reasons. They just weren't the real reason.
Okay.
In the work that I do, we talk about root goals, and we talk about good goals versus root goals. And an organization might say, we want to be the industry leader in blah, blah, blah field, whatever it is we work in. It sounds great. You put that on the annual shareholder report, every shareholder is going to nod their head and say, yeah, that's good. I'd like to buy shares in a company that wants to be the industry leader. But that's not the whole picture. That company wanting to be the industry leader isn't the whole picture of their goal, because you can add a sentence or a couple of words rather behind that goal and it changes everything. So here's what those words are. So that I can. Or in the case of an organization, so that we can. We want to be the industry leader so that we can, what? There's a blank space there.
Yeah. You got to find your why, don't you?
The leadership needs to find that answer. And that answer may lead to another so that we can blank. And we keep going in this process. We keep asking ourselves, so that I can, so that I can, so that I can, until we get to an answer. It's called an autotelic answer, which means, well, autotelic really is what the goal is called. So auto means self and telos means goal. So self goal, which is to say we finally get to an answer where we look at it and we say, I can't distill it any further. That's what I want. That's the root goal. That's the real goal. So what does this have to do with your listeners, and what does it have to do with why I didn't make those changes? It's socially acceptable to stop at good goals, at good reasons. We just don't get to the real reason. And so when we encounter obstacles or difficulty, it's easy to throw our hands up and stop and say, I didn't really want that. I didn't really want to be the industry leader. Because you didn't. It sounded good, but it wasn't really what you wanted. So the reason that I didn't make those changes is because I was never clear on what I really wanted. And there was an element of fear. Because so long as I was doing something that I only kind of cared about, if I wasn't the top rep in the company, that's okay. I didn't really care this much anyway. But if I had put myself out there as a professional musician or what I'm doing now, as a keynote speaker, well, now all of a sudden when I'm judged or when someone says, hey, we really didn't like that song you just played there. It's not my favorite song. I take that a little more personally. I'm much more invested in what I'm doing now. And to be invested or to be vulnerable is risky. And so I was operating in a risk-averse environment. I was lying to myself.
So tell us a little bit more about the period of time during when you're having these surgeries and this major life upset. How were you able to work? You are unable to really sing, or at least I would think it wouldn't be a very good idea if you're having vocal surgery. How were you able to work?
So I was not able to sing. The music career died first, but the sales career quickly followed. I did my best to navigate the sales environment without speaking. And because email was ubiquitous at the time, I could set a lot of appointments, a lot of sales calls, and I could do a lot of prospecting on the computer without having to talk. But then someone had to run the sales call. Someone had to actually conduct the sales appointment. So that made it quite challenging. And it was apparent to me after several months of this that I was no longer going to be effective in my role. And I did try different organizations, tried different tiers of selling. But for the first 3 years, maybe 4 years, as my voice, as they were really getting into the nitty gritty and digging, I don't want to use euphemisms. There were some major problems that had to be addressed, and then there were some minor problems towards the end, refinement, right? So when they were doing the major problems, doing the major work, it was too difficult for me to be able to speak. Towards the end, as they were doing the minor work, I had emotionally given up on sales, but I still needed the money. So while I was in it, I wasn't really there. I mean, I wasn't really in it. I feel like I've navigated away from your question. Remind me your question.
Just the curiosity of what work looks like for a musician or a salesperson who has to use their voice during that period of time. Which you answered to some point, it was hard. It sounds like it was really hard to navigate through that, trying different ways to sell. And how do you, how did you ultimately land, or did you just have to wait until the surgeries were done to really get out of that?
Much of it was waiting. It didn't become clear to me that I was done with sales until I got back from my honeymoon. And after that period of time of reflection, we were in a place where we didn't get cell phone reception or didn't have Wi-Fi at all. So just really being alone with my thoughts and having great conversations with my wife and thinking about what I wanted when I went back. The minute it became clear to me that I didn't want a career in sales anymore, it was as if a weight lifted. I had this incredible freedom, and I felt much clearer on my path. But it was in that middle part when I was kind of half in sales and my mind was half out of sales. It was tough. Nobody likes not being good at something.
Yeah, that's so true. So maybe changing this path here a little bit. Tell us, you perform internationally now and before this major disruption in your life, and how do you capture the attention of these diverse audiences? I think that can be challenging because different walks of life, different beliefs, different countries. How do you do that?
Well, you have to get to know them. There's a lot of research and a lot of planning that goes into a program. I think a misconception about what I do when people don't know much about what I do is that, you get paid all this money to fly into some city and talk for an hour and then fly out. And the truth is, there's in some cases more than a year's worth of planning that goes into a program. These decisions of who's going to speak where are often made 8 to 12 months in advance, sometimes much longer in advance. And there's quite a lot of communication that goes on between myself and the client in the lead up to an event. So we're talking about the theme of the event. I'm getting to know who the attendees are, what past keynote speakers have spoken there, so I can get a feel for who's resonated with the audience and who's sort of fallen flat. Oftentimes I'll speak with event attendees, so I may be at the event the day before, and I'll spend time getting to know the attendees, sitting in on some of the sessions, depending on where I'm at in the lineup. If I'm the opening speaker, obviously I can't really do that. But if I'm the closing speaker, I'll try to attend a few breakout sessions and understand what's going on in the conference. But I'll have done my research well before that. So it really just comes down to knowing the audience and putting yourself in a position to be of service to them.
Yeah, it sounds a little challenging, more work than like maybe your typical, music artist. A music artist flies in, they know who their audience is, they sing a concert. It's the same audience in some level wherever they go, where you're kind of creating a new audience. They don't know you yet when you're going to these conferences. So do you have any tools or strategies you use? You talked about going to some breakout sessions, but to just find common ground in these different environments you walk into very quickly, how do you break down those barriers to start those conversations?
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. And one of the things that I think goes overlooked when it comes to building rapport, connecting with someone quickly, is appreciation and admiration. right? We all want to be liked. No matter, I know there's people out there who say, I don't care if people like me. Well, I call BS because we all want to be liked deep down. So I try to find something about the people in the audience, and I have to, of course, group them as an association. So if it's HR professionals, I might say, you know, what I really admire about you as HR professionals, what you do in the world, is that you create work environments that lift other people up. I know you don't get credit enough for this, but I know the hard work you put in to the work you do to create an environment for all of your employees and your colleagues where they feel empowered to do their best work, where they feel valued when they do their best work. I just want to take a minute to commend you for that because I think it's really important, the work that you do. Just by going out on stage and saying that, I've instantly created a connection because I found something about them that I admire. And so I open the door for them to find something about me that they may like or be interested in. Hopefully it's the content I'm there to talk about.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, just finding that common ground is so important. But so I watched quite a bit of your online content. I try to research to get to know the guests that we have on here. Tell me what I learned in there. You talk a lot about disruption and how you can use that for good. So can you tell us more about that and what you mean by that?
Well, people often think of disruption as a negative. And it sort of bothers me when I walk places and you see a construction sign and it says, we apologize for the disruption, but we're under construction. Well, should you apologize? Is the goal of this construction to make my life inconvenient?
Well,
Or is the
maybe.
goal of this construction to make my life better, to make the experience better? So it's important when we start talking about disruption that we define it. And I define disruption as a change that sustains and sets a new standard. So the important part of that definition is sustain and setting a new standard. Obviously, disruption is some kind of change, but there's lots of change out there. There's interruption, right? A commercial is an interruption that we'd all rather do without. And so TiVo got invented, and now we can avoid the interruption. Regular change, what I call fleeting change or unsustained change, it happens all the time. You change your underpants, you change your t-shirt. Change happens all around us all the time.
Absolutely.
But disruption is a special type of change. Disruption not only sustains, but it sets a new standard. And setting a new standard is so important. The cordless phone was a disruption. We're never going back to phones that are corded, that are attached to the wall. Uber was a disruption because we're never again going to pick up the phone and call a taxi cab company and hope and pray that in 45 minutes, somebody's taxi shows up in front of my house. We can now use an app. So it's important that we be able to define disruption before we talk about using it as a force for good. But once we understand the definition, what I encourage people to do in their own lives, in their workplace, and in their world place, is to create disruption. I believe that that's one of the reasons we're all here, is to create disruption, to create new standards, to level up, to consistently be growing, to seeing how can we push our potential for the better good, for the betterment of everyone. And so if we do this as individuals, what does our life look like? Well, can we take ourselves from a life that is, it's okay, it's mildly acceptable, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It is enough to make us content. And can we use the principle of disruption to create a life that is magnificent? What if we do this at work? Can we take a work experience that's blah, blah, that's, it's so-so, it's average, it's okay? And can we take it to create a type of work environment that people want to come back to again and again? I call this the Encore experience. How do we create an Encore experience at work? How do we create an experience that people want to come back to? Not, I feel like I got to come back because I need the paycheck, but oh my gosh, I can't wait to be back there on Monday. Not every day is going to be like that. I'm not blind to the fact that we all have bad days at work. Heck, I'm my own boss and I've got bad days at work. I've got some days where I think, maybe I'd rather be a greeter at Walmart. Seems a lot easier. But we as leaders are responsible for our environment and for the energy we allow into that environment. In fact, I was listening to my friend Cy Wakeman speak at an event this past weekend, and she said leaders don't manage their people, they manage their people's energy. And she's right. That's really what this is all about. So how do we create disruption in our business and in our personal life so that we're growing, that we're progressing towards a goal? That's what I'm fascinated in.
So Gregory, define really quickly what your industry is. Are you coaching? Are you a business consultant? What is that industry for me real quick?
It doesn't really fit a bucket, Nate.
Okay.
So I'm a keynote speaker. I do consult with some businesses. I'm in the process of outlining and beginning the writing process of my first book. And I coach occasionally. It is, for me, a very draining exercise because I put a lot of energy into the people that I coach. And I happen to have a 21-month-old daughter. So as my daughter was born, I really scaled back the amount of coaching clients I took on because I need to be smart about my energy. Energy is one of the 7 keys of success that we need to be mindful of in our life. That when I looked at my experience and putting all the job-specific training and skills that I had gathered over the course of my career, I saw there were these skills that were undeveloped, that when I looked at other successful people out in the world were really important to their success. I hadn't developed them. And one of them is energy management, managing your emotional energy, your physical energy, and your financial energy. So I don't really do a lot of coaching. Most of my work is speaking and consulting.
So even though it's a little hard to define it, tell us what you think is at least define it for me. What's a common myth? What do people come to you and think that you do? What's a common myth about what you do?
Yeah, they think I make videos on YouTube all day.
Oh.
One of my uncles, when I first started doing this, that's what he said. He said, so like, what do you do all day? Like, you make videos online? Like, is that your job? It's like, well, that's part of my job. Yes. I mean, I have ideas that I'm putting out into the world and I've got to get them out there somewhere. You know, it's like, would you look at an actor and say, so what do you do? Like, you play dress up all day? I mean, kind of. That's called a costume.
Yeah.
So that's a misconception. I think another misconception that's interesting to talk about is one that I had about the field. And that is that to be a keynote speaker, you have to have climbed Mount Everest or flown, an airplane and landed it upside down on the Hudson River or, whatever. You really just have to be passionate about changing the world. You have to be able to communicate your idea in, say, 60 minutes, give or take. That's about how long most keynotes are, is 60 minutes. You have to communicate your idea in a way that people understand. That's in a way the hardest part of what I do, is that I live in my information all day long. And when I say I live in it, I'm thinking about my topic all day long. It's all I do. The people in the audience are not thinking about my topic very much at all. That's why I'm there, to get them thinking about it. So the way I talk about my topic with my colleagues, with the people who work for me, or with my coaches and mentors, is different than the way I need to talk about it in front of a group of strangers. And that's a very hard skill to master for people. But if you're passionate about changing the world, and if you can present your material in an interesting and engaging way that other people can follow, there's no reason you can't become a keynote speaker.
So tell me, what do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing in your business right now? And how are you planning, or how are you overcoming it currently?
Yeah. For me, I mentioned having a 21-month-old daughter.
That can be a challenge in itself.
It is not a business challenge, but it's a challenge that's affecting my business, because I'm learning how to parent this business and be a good spouse and be a good brother and son and, all the other things that I want to be out in the world. And I want to give my daughter as much of my time and energy and love as I absolutely possibly can, but I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And creativity is exhausting. So to be creating new material, I'm having to reevaluate how I refresh and recharge myself so that I can become more efficient at it and more effective. And that's a challenge. I'm actually actively looking for a coach to help me with that right now. So that is the way that I address challenges in my business, is by trying to gain an understanding of how complicated it is to solve. And if it's something I can solve in a week, I'll do it myself. If it's something that's going to take longer, I'll generally hire a professional because they can shorten my time.
Yeah, that's so true. So, what do you think, in your opinion, what's the most important personality trait or strength that somebody needs to have to be successful in business?
Curiosity.
Why do you say that?
Well, you just exemplified it. It's all about the questions that we ask, right? So if you weren't curious, you would say, great answer, let's move on. But you're curious. So you say, well, why is that? Help me understand. Tell me a little bit more. If we were all a little more curious in life, I wonder what that could do for us. I wonder what kind of doors that might open if we were willing to ask questions instead of being scared to look like someone who doesn't know the answer. Because I've lived both worlds, where I became, the guy who asked too many questions, where my coworkers were probably like, dude, shut up. This meeting should have been over an hour ago. But I've also been on the other side of the table, where I'm so afraid that I'm going to be found out for not knowing what's going on, that I'm going to be found out as the newbie in the room, that I didn't ask questions. And because of that, I really did look like the newbie in the room, because I made a dumb mistake that could have been avoided had I just asked a question. So now I am proudly, happily, the dumbest person in any room. I am happy to ask questions, and that curiosity will take us so far, both in our personal and our professional life.
So, if I were starting out in my career today, what word of advice would you give me?
Well, what is your career?
Oh, well, any career. That's the question. If
Okay.
somebody's starting out their business today, their career, they're fresh out of college, where do they start?
Yeah. So career agnostic advice. Got it. So one, become a lifelong learner. If your salary is the most valuable thing you get from your job, you're already losing.
Oh,
The job is an education that you get paid for. What are you learning? What are you learning at work? And if the answer is nothing, you need to look in the mirror and do an inventory of the questions that you ask every day when you're at work. Because my guess is you're probably not applying curiosity. There's always something to learn. Whenever I go to a conference, I love to watch the sessions. The session may have nothing to do with anything I'm interested in professionally. But if someone is speaking in front of a group of other people, there's something I can learn. Maybe it's the way they use their body to tell a story. Maybe it's a PowerPoint slide they put together and I think, oh, that was really neat. I didn't expect the information to be presented in that way. There's always something to learn if we try. The gift, the magic, is in figuring out what it is that we can learn. But if your salary is the most valuable thing you get from a job, you've already lost. I mean, you're far behind. So curiosity is an important driver for business. And a spirit or a culture of lifelong learning is the best piece of advice I can give anybody who's starting out.
that's a really good word. Thank you for sharing that. Tell me about your mentors. You didn't come to this all yourself, I'm sure. You've had to have somebody mentoring you through this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really get a giggle whenever I read that somebody's a self-made millionaire, billionaire, whatever. Nobody's self-made. First of all, your mom and dad made you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, nobody does this alone. So we've all had help. Nobody is self-made. That's the biggest, I think, pie in the face of anyone who's given somebody help along the way is to turn around and say, oh, I'm self-made. Like, hell you are. So I've had many mentors. I mean, it starts with my parents, who were my first mentors. All of my teachers, again, I learned something from. I either learned what I didn't like in a teacher, or I learned something that I did like in a teacher. And then throughout my professional journey, both my bosses have been mentors and my coworkers have been mentors. Because again, I think if you're always looking and asking, what can I learn from this experience? You'll find education everywhere. So I believe people learn in one of two ways. We either teach ourselves or we're taught by others. So, Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, two great examples of individuals who taught themselves to read. But you can also go to school and take reading and English and grammar and learn to read. Similarly, when we think about our own attitude in life, or our beliefs, rather, I should say, about life, because I believe that the attitude we have isn't ours. It's someone else's. What does that mean? Well, your attitude is how you show up to me. It's how I see you. So, Nate, you can control the factors that go into your attitude, your body language, the tone of voice, how you present yourself, physically in terms of did you dress up, did you dress down, all these things contribute to your attitude, but your attitude is how other people perceive you. It's like trying to give yourself a nickname, Yeah. What do you mean you gave yourself a nickname? That's kind of, people look down on that. Well, you can't say, I have a great attitude. That's not your decision. That's my decision to make. And similarly, I don't get to decide that I have a great attitude. You do. Or you may say, Greg, I think you have a piss poor attitude. That's your choice. But belief is how we see ourselves. So I say that attitude is how others see you, and belief is what you see when you look in the mirror.
It's very good. So tell me, what's one thing about being a keynote speaker that if I had a whole room full of keynote speakers, what would be unique to you? What would they not agree with you on?
What would be unique to me is that I play the piano while I speak on stage. So I use the piano in my keynote. Many, not all, but many keynoters would say that, oh, that's a cardinal rule you're breaking there. See, what we do is we just speak on stages. We don't perform and entertain like that. But that sentiment is kind of shifting. One of the things that I like about our community is that we're more uniting than we are dividing. So I don't know that there's a lot that they disagree with me on. And quite frankly, I'm still new to this game. I've only been doing it 3 years. So I don't have a lot of hard and fast opinions about this, about the work that we do just yet. I'm very spongy right now, which is to say I'm soaking up lots of information from my peers.
I do love that you play the piano along with it. So it's a skill that I wish I had. I tried it, and they even told me find another thing to do. So
yeah?
It's unfortunate part of my journey that I did try it, but I was not very good at it. So tell me
this may surprise you.
Yeah.
But everybody sucks when they start.
Yes, it's true.
I mean, if I like to use the example of the Beatles because generally everybody knows who the Beatles are. The Beatles were rejected by several labels, and they had to perform, not had to, I guess they chose to perform 3 to 4 times a day before they were big. And one of the things that I love about that example is it shows the power of perseverance and the power of exposure. So not only did they persevere, but they said, okay, how do I become an expert at this craft? Repetition, exposure, over and over again, expose myself to the stage, expose myself to the audience. Not in that way, don't be nasty. I'm saying expose yourself to being in front of an audience so that you can gain experience. And they supercharged that. They compressed time. By doing 3 and 4 gigs a day, they compressed time. Most musicians don't even do 3 and 4 gigs a week. They're doing it a day. So in the span of 1 week, they've done more gigs than many musicians do in a month. In the span of a year, they've done more gigs than many musicians will do in 20 years. So I think that if you really are passionate about playing the piano, if you gave it another chance, you'd find that you can get better. But maybe for you, I don't know, I'm just saying maybe playing the piano is just something that sounds good to say, but you didn't really care that much about it. And that's okay too.
Yep.
But that was just a great example of, is that a root goal or just a good goal?
Long time ago goal. So you know how life takes you in different directions. So you, Gregory, if you were to start a business tomorrow, what would that business be besides being a keynote speaker?
Do I need to have the ability to do it, or just magic wand, I can do anything?
Magic wand.
Oh my goodness. Well, I got to tell you, if I could do anything tomorrow, magic wand, I'd be a disc jockey.
Oh,
I'd be a professional DJ. I love the idea of getting up in front of a crowd and being able to control that many people's emotions, their experience, just with the push of a button. I think that's so cool. But I don't know how to work DJ equipment. So that would be a barrier. But if you're telling me magic wand, I could do anything, I think being a DJ would be pretty cool.
I don't think that'd be too hard of a pivot for you if you figured out how to be a keynote during COVID, after the journey of having to rebuild your vocal cords and being
That's
able
true.
to sing and talk again. So, hey, Gregory Offner, I really appreciate your time you spent with us here on the journey today. Got a couple rapid fire questions here at the end.
Okay.
What are 3 books you would recommend to the audience?
One is The Little Prince by Saint Antoine de Exupéry. Don't ask me how to spell that, but if you just Google The Little Prince, you'll find it there. Another is Man's Search for Meaning. Hang on, I'm going to mess these two up, doggone it. I think that's Viktor Frankl. And the other one is As a Man Thinketh, by James Allen.
All right, another one here. If I'm starting a business today, what's the word of advice you would give to that person?
Yeah, so it would be develop a culture of lifelong learning.
All right, and I've asked you a lot of questions today, Gregory. What's one question you wish I would have asked you, and how would you have answered that question?
Well, so the question that I love to get asked is, where do we go from here? Because it's great to talk about information, but I've seen hundreds of people leave conferences with notebooks full of information, and then they've told me themselves they never touch it afterwards. So I'm sure there are people that are listening to this podcast that if we don't give them an actionable takeaway, this is just going to be an hour spent listening to you and I talk. So what I'd like to offer to your listeners is a list of those 7 keys. I mentioned one earlier, which was the key of E, energy, but there are 7 of them. And we call them keys because I'm a piano player. Pianos have keys. Well, we've got 7 keys. And I'd love to give a handout to your audience. I think the best way for them to get it would probably be to text me. So if they text the word keys, Keys, to the number 33777, and then I'll ask for their email and their first name, I'll send them a list of the 7 keys of success. They can then take those keys and implement them in their life. I would say just pick one to implement. But they can literally begin that process of disrupting their life in a good way by starting to develop one of these 7 keys. So if they text the word keys, Keys, to 33777, I'll email them that one sheet, and they're not going to get spammed or any crap like that. It's just to get you this. That's all I want it for. And I would honestly love if they connected with me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. Just search me. I'm Gregory Offner Jr. And tell me what you thought about the episode. Tell me what resonated with you. What are you going to do differently as a result of listening to Nate and I talk today?
Yeah, and go check out Gregory's website. Really love what he's doing there with it. A lot different than I'm seeing in people in similar veins of work. So check it out. I love the piano music. I love the keynote in the videos and stuff. Very engaging. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, Gregory, and just sharing your advice and your wisdom. It's GregoryOffner.com. It's his website. Connect with him on LinkedIn. It's got some fantastic content. I was just really blown away and really glad that I had the chance to meet with him today. Thanks for being a part of it, Gregory.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nate.
All right. Have a great day.